The textbook says chess was invented in India. It says the game is nearly 1,500 years old. It says a Brahmin mathematician named Sissa created it for a king, presented as a gift. And when the king offered him any reward he desired, Sissa requested for 1 grain of wheat placed on the first square of the board, doubled on each subsequent square. The king laughed. He thought it was a modest request, until his treasury ran the calculations and came back with 18 quintillion, 446 quadrillion, 744 trillion, 73 billion, 709,551,615 grains of wheat, an amount requiring the entire planet's wheat harvest for 5,000 years to fulfill. The king was not laughing anymore. That is a good story. It travels well, and almost none of it is provably true. There is no credible archaeological evidence that chess existed in any recognizable form before approximately 600 CE. The earliest literary reference to the game appears in a Persian text from the 7th century, describing events that supposedly occurred a century earlier. What survives is a story about a game's origin, written by the people who received it secondhand, more than 100 years after the fact. Two different groups of historians are currently competing claims. One attributes the game to India, the other to Persia. But neither has physical evidence from the period in question. A third theory, China, exists within the scholarly conversation, though it holds little traction in mainstream chess history. The presence of that debate alone indicates how unsettled the official account actually is. The initiative group Knickstein, the primary academic forum for chess origin research, has published a finding that most mainstream history is reduced to a footnote. After decades of seminars, the group concludes that the question about the origin of chess still has to be considered open, because the available evidence has not been sufficient for a convincing theory. The game's origin is unverified. What is documented is this. Sometime around the 6th century CE, a game called Chaturanga appears in northern India, within the Gupta Empire. The word Chaturanga is Sanskrit for the 4 divisions of the military: infantry, cavalry, elephants, and chariots. Those 4 divisions map directly onto the pieces used today: pawn, knight, bishop, rook. The structural logic of the modern game is embedded in the name of its Indian predecessor. The clearest evidence for Chaturanga as the name of a game, however, does not appear in Indian literature until the 9th century, 300 years after the period when the game is supposed to have originated. The Iranians have noticed this. Their argument is direct. The oldest physical evidence and the oldest literary chess evidence come from Persia, not India. The earliest surviving Persian text to mention the game by name, the Artakshatri-Papakan, dates to the 7th century. The lexical lineage of the modern game runs through Pahlavi, the Middle Persian language, not Sanskrit. The word checkmate derives from the Persian phrase Shah Mat, Shah meaning king, Mat meaning helpless. The king is helpless. That phrase survived 2,000 miles of conquest and 1,000 years of evolution. The Persian word, not the Indian one. A discovery in Samarkand complicates this further. In 1977, archaeologists excavating a site called Afrasiab in what is now Uzbekistan unearthed a collection of carved pieces believed to be the oldest chess pieces ever found, dated to the 7th century CE. Samarkand sat at the intersection of the Silk Road, directly between India and Persia. The pieces remain in a museum in Uzbekistan, and their provenance has not resolved the debate. In 651 CE, the armies of Arabia completed their conquest of the Sassanid Persian Empire. Among what they inherited was shatranj. Within a generation, the game had spread across the Islamic world, from Baghdad to Cordoba, from Cairo to Tashkent. It was in that context, not in India or Persia, that chess became something more than a board game. Chess entered Europe through Spain and Sicily, carried by the Islamic world that had developed it. As it moved west, the second piece on the board underwent a transformation. The Arabs called it firzan, counselor or vizier. As the Arabic word was absorbed into European languages, it grammatically feminized. The counselor became a countess. The countess became a queen. A medieval Latin poem from 997 CE, preserved in a Swiss monastery, the Einsideln poem, contains the first known written reference to the chess piece as Regina. For its entire recorded history to that point, that piece had moved 1 square diagonally, 1 square. Between 1475 and 1495 CE, in the courts of southern Europe, the queen became the most powerful piece on the board. The change was abrupt enough that the new version of the game was called Mad Queen's Chess, Scacchi della Donna, and early rulebooks had to be written to explain what the queen could now do. Historians frequently cite Queen Isabella I of Castile, the monarch who funded Columbus, expelled the Moors from Spain, and personally directed military campaigns across 2 continents, as the political inspiration for the Queen's sudden ascendancy on the board. The timing is exactly right. The geography is exactly right. Most academics treat the connection as plausible and unproven in equal measure. Around the same period, a set of carved walrus ivory figures was being transported by a Norse merchant toward the Isle of Lewis, in what is now Scotland. He never delivered them. In 1831, a local man named Malcolm MacLeod discovered a subterranean stone chamber near Uig Bay, containing 93 carved objects. 78 of those objects were chess pieces. They dated to approximately 1150 to 1200 CE. They are now known as the Lewis Chessmen. 82 are held by the British Museum in London. 11 are in Edinburgh. Scotland has periodically requested their return. One medieval saga, Paul's Saga Bishops, the saga of Bishop Paul, describes a noblewoman named Margaret the Adroit, wife of a priest, crafting chess pieces from walrus ivory on commission. The theory that a woman carved the most recognized medieval chess set in existence rests on a single textual source and no corroborating evidence. No inscription, no tool, no workshop record connects the Lewis Chessmen to any individual maker. The claim may be accurate. It cannot be demonstrated. The goddess Caïssa, universally recognized as the patron deity of chess, her name appearing in tournament programs, carved on trophies, and cited in chess literature as though she were ancient, was invented in 1527 CE. Not recovered from antiquity, invented. A Renaissance poet named Hieronymus Vida wrote a Latin poem describing a chess match between the gods Apollo and Mercury, observed by other gods, in which a forest nymph named Caïssa watches the game. She is as ancient as any figure from a 500-year-old poem. Today, the World Chess Championship title is held by Gukesh Domaraju of India, who became the youngest undisputed world champion in December 2024, defeating Ding Liren. The country that may or may not have invented this game currently holds the world title. The origin question remains open. No archaeological discovery has resolved it. The initiative group Knigstein continues to hold seminars. The Afrasiab pieces remain in Uzbekistan. The Lewis Chessmen remain divided between London and Edinburgh. Margaret the Adroit remains a theory. Caïssa remains a poem. The game, 64 squares, 32 pieces, the same board format maintained for 1500 years across 6 continents, and every language ever spoken keeps being played. If the true origin of the most studied strategy game in human history were to be replaced by a myth elegant enough that no one would question it for 1,000 years, it would look exactly like this.